Bridget, and I am an alcoholic. I want to thank you for inviting me out to Paramount. It's a great group. Thank our first speaker. You were wonderful, and I identify a lot in a lot of ways. Even though I'm a woman, isn't that the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous? We identify with actions, behaviors, and feelings, and we are people that normally wouldn't mix. And I say that not with the least bit of sarcasm, but with the utmost sincerity, because looking at the differences for me kept me drinking and doing other behaviors, like our first speaker. I was an instant gratification person, so I prefer it mainlined, if you know what I mean. But I identify as an alcoholic because I have alcoholism, not alcoholism. If it were alcoholism, I wouldn't be here tonight. I'd be watching the Super Bowl with the rest of the people who aren't here. But even after 21 years of sobriety, I need you to remind me. I need you to remind me that God is in this room when I forget. You know, when I forget my primary purpose and forget that I have a killer disease, a disease that tells me I don't have one and that I can play with the big kids now because I'm normal, you know. I can go out there and make my life happen. You know, read those self-help books and listen to Tony Robbins tape, and yeah, by the time I'm done listening, I feel like such a loser because I haven't done any of that stuff, you know. I'm sponsoring people that have, let's just say I used to think it would take me 35 years of sobriety to hit their financial bottom. And that's my first thought. But you know what? I've got a step that says, okay, I'm powerless over that first thought, but not over the second and the third, because I have steps for that. And the second half of the first step tells me that, oh yeah, my life is unmanageable if I'm trying to manage it. And the second step is, oh, there's a God. Thank God there's a God that I don't understand, but there is, running the show. So I'm really, really grateful to be here, and I want to thank Michael and Maureen for reminding me. I don't know who reminded me, Michael or Maureen, but they're like salt and pepper. They're a pair, so thank you both. And I want to thank our leader. You know, every time I see you, you are so... What I love about this group and Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole is, you know, people that have manners and are respectful. And I know that is not where we come from, because you wouldn't be sitting in this room tonight. You know, I learned when I was in kindergarten, I was told not to talk while people are talking. You know, at 5 years old, well, I forgot that when I was falling off bar stools. I forgot that I wasn't supposed to interrupt and that it wasn't all about me and that I wasn't supposed to kick people and take their money. You know, all of that stuff just kind of went out the window. I wasn't raised to behave the way I behaved when I started drinking. And, you know, I want to welcome all the newcomers to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, we do this one day at a time. We do this one day at a time. For me, sometimes it was one eyelash at a time, but I did it one day at a time. And I don't want to sound blasphemous, but I want to welcome and thank God to anyone who's in this room over 10 years of sobriety that keeps coming back. Because can you imagine if we didn't? And it was all newcomers? You know, the big book was written, these people had 3-4 years sober. Bill had 13, 15 years sober when he wrote the 12 and 12, and he's no longer here. They're gone. Our original members, we're carrying the message. People are getting sober younger. You know, think about it. If you get sober when you're 20 and you live to be 80, there'll be people in this room with 60 years of sobriety. I mean, if I live to be 85, I'll be 60-something years sober. And chances are, if I keep up my lifestyle, I will. And it's very important that we practice these principles and that we keep these traditions up. That nothing changes, because the disease has not changed. You know, society has. I know in the town I live in, West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, there's some interesting people. Interesting. There's some real interesting meetings. Thank God I got sober under Alabama. God bless you, Alabama, up in the big meeting in the sky at the old Radford group, where she said, "You wash coffee cups, you know why?" I said, "Why?" Well, in the half hour it takes you, you have another half hour of sobriety. I thought, God, this woman is a real whiz. Boy, that's clever. But I did it. You know what I mean? I have stayed sober this long by doing things I thought were stupid, that made no sense whatsoever, and they've turned out to be exactly what I needed to do. Because I have a disease of perception. You know, I didn't grow up wanting to be an alcoholic or a junkie. I wanted to be a ballerina or a detective, one of the two. I loved Nancy Drew. I read Nancy Drew books. She was this, for those of you who don't know, Nancy was an amateur detective. She always was involved in mysteries. She had a rich father, a maid, and her mother was dead. She had a perfect life as far as I was concerned. And always landed on her feet. She was very independent, no worries, no cares, but always in drama and action. And, that sounded exciting. You know what I mean? I was 5, 6 years old, and I was already a drama queen. And my mother suggested if I was going to be one of the two, ballerina might be more likely, but I should probably take secretarial courses. I never listened to my mother. So I continued to take ballet lessons and read Nancy Drew books. And, from the time I was a young girl, I was an instant gratification person and a perfectionist. You know, our book talks about that. Perfection almost killed me before I ever drank. I had to be the perfect ballerina. Because, you see, if I was perfect and strived for perfection, then I would feel kind of right-sized with you. But if I was anything less than, if you didn't give me accolades and praise, then I was down in the gutter. I mean, that was my estimation of self, based on what you said and how I felt about what I thought you thought. Does that make sense? Well, sure it does to alcoholics. It doesn't to normal folks, because they don't necessarily think that way. But I relied on people, places, and things so much that it's amazing I can actually stand here and say I went to a religious school for years. And I don't know what really they said, but I know what I heard, okay? And I heard, God's gonna get you. And you might as well have a good time before he does. That's what I heard. And, by the time I took my first drink, I was stressed out. I was a stressed out kid, straight A student, aspiring dancer, had scholarships, had performed just before the union started for stage. And I took that drink. And it's amazing that drink did something for me, that all the years of starvation and perfection and whipping myself to death to be perfect just didn't do. This did it. It did something for me. And interestingly enough, I couldn't stop. Nor did I want to, quite frankly. It was working. Why should I stop? I wasn't paying prices yet. You know, when alcohol started doing things to me instead of for me, then I realized that I couldn't stop. And I didn't know I couldn't stop until I tried. And I gave it about that much effort and said, forget it. I'm destined to be this, alcoholic who does alcohol in all kinds of other forms. Let's face it, I started drinking at 14 years old. You can't go buy alcohol, but you can buy heroin. So, you do what you got to do. And I remember saying when I first came to the Radford group, and Alabama was very, very strict about, the traditions in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'd come to AA through NA. I'll say it's amazing I survived Narcotics Anonymous, but I made it to AA. Okay. So here I am in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm an addict, and I'm an alcoholic, and she said, you know what, saying addict, alcoholic's like saying you live in Los Angeles and you live in California. She's a bright woman. That was tricky. And so for singleness of purpose, and because I have a disease, I'm recovered physically, but I have a disease of the mind. I have a soul sickness that I'm working on every single day. I say alcoholic. Okay, so that's over with. I grew up in a family. Not all of us come from dysfunctional, crazy homes. It just so happens I did. It's not why I'm an alcoholic. I could pretty much sum up our family crest would be nobody moves, nobody gets hurt. That's it, and life goes on from there. My mother drank. Boy, did my mother drink. And my father was angry. And my father went out on her. My parents had me, God bless them. They were 18 years old. They had their kids having kids. And that's a problem from the get-go. And they both come from very troubled homes. My mother comes from an alcoholic home. My father comes from a long line of cruelty. It's amazing. Not alcoholism, just plain cruelty, unusual cruelty. And he actually is a miracle in my eyes. But I couldn't always talk like this about my family. My father had a lot of affairs on my mother, and I remember her dragging me out drunk to go look for my dad and have me knock on doors of women's homes that he would be sleeping at and embarrass him and embarrass me, and I was absolutely mortified, and I hated her for this. But she was my mom. This is my lifeline. When you're a little kid, your parents are your oxygen tank. You do anything to please them and survive. Children smile automatically for survival. He like me, love me, please don't dump me down the gutter. And so when I got that drink at 13, 14 years old, the sense of ease and comfort I had been looking for my whole life was right there. And I found it in other forms. I graduated quickly. I swore I would never be like my mother. I would never swear, I would never drink, I would never be obsessed. I love the word obsessed with a man. I would never be that obsessed with anything. We'll never say never if you're an alcoholic, because when I took a drink, the drink took a drink and the drink took me and it was over. Because I have a physical allergy. I drank with other people that night that didn't end up in Alcoholics Anonymous. They didn't end up in prison like I did. They didn't end up in nut houses and detoxes and emergency rooms like I did because they don't have the physical allergy. Coupled with the mental obsession. Boy, that word obsession. I know it well sober. And the steps, I love this 12 steps and the 12 traditions and the concepts, that's our program. These are the principles by which I live. I wouldn't know a step if it bit me in the ass when I was drinking. I need them sober. I had alcohol. What did I need steps for? But the alcohol started to do things to me. And I don't want to talk a lot about drinking, but I'll briefly qualify for those of you who think that I always wore suits and combed my hair, because I didn't. By the time I was 16, I was living in a foster home. I'd been thrown out of school. I lost the dance scholarship, and I met a guy named Dave. That really wasn't his name, but that's what he told me. And he was a professional burglar from New York. He robbed a museum, had this artwork, and I was impressed. Don't know why. I knew nothing about artwork, but it seemed like a big deal to a 16-year-old. And we were drinking and driving and thinking, bad combination right there, what to do with this artwork. And he introduced me to cocaine. So I'm drinking and doing coke and thinking, and he's driving, and we're in the middle of the desert. I'm assuming Barstow, but I really don't know. And pretty soon I'm decoding the radio messages it's giving me. I'm figuring it out, the license plates I'm decoding, and I'm looking at him going, oh God, he works for the CIA and he wants me in my half a gram. Oh my God. And I think he's thinking the same thing about me, because he kept asking if I needed to use the bathroom, and it's, in the middle of the night and there's nothing but cactus, and I know he's going to dump me out there and leave me. So I beat him to the punch, and I put 20 Valium in his beer, and he got a little woozy, pulled over, passed out, and I kicked him out of the car and I left him there. And I made it back to Hollywood. My my migratory space. You know, I'm a creature of habit. I love rituals. I always did. You know, Catholic school. You know, I just got into the whole ritual thing, and that's one of the things I love about Alcoholics Anonymous. I like my ritual. I need this. So I go back to Hollywood and I go knocking on someone's door, and I'd been up for days. The money was gone, the alcohol was gone, and I hadn't slept in quite a while, and apparently it was obvious. And this guy answers the door and he hands me a drink and says, "Here, you need to sleep. And you know what your problem is? Cocaine." I said, yeah, I agree. And the solution was heroin. He turned me on to heroin. And I wish that I could tell you when I got sober that my solutions weren't any worse than my problems. They were. They really were. You know, when I got sober, fairy dust wasn't sprinkled on my head, and I walked into AA, and all of a sudden the light bulb went off, and I realized, okay, I'm sober. I don't drink anymore. Problem solved. You know, drinking was but a symptom. I really got to know what my problems were, me, my thinking, my self-loathing, my selfishness, my self-centeredness. I was about 5 years sober when it really hit me. Man, I need some help. I think I need to use the steps. So he turned me on to heroin, God through better chemistry, you know, alcohol, heroin. It was perfect until I met Mark, who's, at least he said that was his name. It wasn't his name either. He was a car thief. And he stole a car. He was too drunk to drive. I'm driving this car all of 10 minutes, and we get pulled over by the police. And he told the cops that he was hitchhiking. He'd never seen me before. That meant I was in trouble, okay? I was driving a stolen car, and he had thrown, there was open containers, there was heroin in the back seat, there was stolen jewelry, none of which I knew about, but it didn't matter because I was driving the car. Now, interestingly enough, when I did finally go to jail and I'm in prison for 18 months, I said, I didn't do it. I really didn't do it. And they said, you know what, honey, there's 2,000 women in here that didn't do it either. Just chill out, would you? My whole life was saying I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, I blamed my family. I blamed my alcoholic mother, my angry father. My sister and brother for not paying the kind of attention to me that they should have. I blamed my home life. And you know, if you're an alcoholic like me, you've got to blame somebody because the things I did were insane. You know, at 17 years old, one more time I was thinking, well, I'm going to try to dance. I'm going to go on this audition. And before the audition, I had to loosen up a little. So I snorted pure PCP and drank tequila. Hey, loosen up, right? My solution to nerves, and I blacked out. I woke up in an emergency room. Apparently, I'd gone through the windshield of the car, and had been in a coma. I didn't even know. I woke up, and these lights are above me. I thought I was having a dream, and the dream was that all these lights were on me, and someone was saying, all these people were saying, Bridget, we're over here, Bridget, Bridget, and I kept saying, I'm over here, I'm not over there. And later on, when I was a couple years sober, my sponsor said to me, you know, it sounds like you left your body. Guess it wasn't your time to go. I just thought it was a dream. No coincidences, I'm here, you know, didn't break a bone. Out of that emergency room, my face was so cut up it was unrecognizable. I don't have a scar. And the first thing I did when my mother picked me up from the emergency room and brought me to her house because I wasn't living with her at the time, I woke up a couple of hours later, took her television set and went and hawked it. And as I'm walking down the street with Mom's TV, I want to tell you, this is a low point in my life. I've stolen a lot of things from people. I'm a taker. I take anything that isn't nailed down because if you have it, you can spare it, right? You know, you bear it, right? You know, you've got insurance. And I need it, quite frankly. I'm one of those poor underdogs in life that just give me enough money and I can get my act together. And I'm walking down the street carrying Mom's TV. Mom, my mother, my poor mother. God bless this woman who, the night she must have stayed up wondering, God, is my daughter going to be on the 6 o'clock news? and I'm blaming her for my disease. And I'm walking down the street with this television. The heavier it gets, the cheaper it gets. You know what I mean? By the time I get to where I'm going, shit, just give me something. It doesn't matter. And a drink would be nice too. So I end up in Alcoholics Anonymous through the courts. And you know, I used to have these moments of clarity, actually moments of disparity. And I would say to myself, how did a straight A student, Catholic school girl, aspiring dancer, end up here? How did I end up behind bars? How does this happen? It's called alcoholism. That's how it happens. And the same thing goes for today. How did a woman who was behind bars end up standing at a podium with 21 years sober and a life that she loves? It's called Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, the problem and the solution. It's so simple you could miss it, but there's a lot of steps to go in between. And when I finally surrendered to the fact that I was an alcoholic, you know, I think that was the most honest I'd ever been. And when you raise your hand in an AA meeting and say, my name is Bridget and I'm an alcoholic, that's the most honest I had been in my entire life. To admit that I'm an alcoholic, I couldn't admit that. You know, I didn't stay sober when I came to my first meeting. I did not. I thought, someone took a cake for a year, the room exploded with applause, and I thought, well, that's not very funny. She hasn't had a drink in a year. Why are they clapping? I did not get this. I didn't understand this. And I remember an old-timer clearly telling me, listen, honey, we do it one day at a time, but we do it forever. You know, I don't care if you think that I'm scary and mean. The book says if you have any reservations, what'll happen next week when your boyfriend leaves you? If you've got that reservation that this isn't forever, you have an excuse to go. The excuses are over. I had a million reasons, but no excuses. A lot of reasons to drink. RTD, the bus, reason to drink. I mean, anything that I could think of that was inconvenient to Bridget was a reason to drink. And, you know, the arrogance of the alcoholic. I don't care if you're sitting in here with a Gucci suit or the county jail duds on. If you've been on a bathroom floor, sick as a dog, it levels the playing field. The outfit doesn't matter. You know, I get self-esteem by doing esteemable acts. It's by what I do. Not what I think and not what I say. It's showing up. I remember when I first got sober, my sponsor said, you know, when you go grocery shopping, don't you push that cart off and let it hang around in the parking lot. You take your cart and you wheel it across the parking lot into the rack where the carts go. And I said, that is so, I was going to say stupid, and I didn't bother. I said, okay. And to this day, I take the cart, I push it across the parking lot, and I put it in the rack. You see, what's happened for me, and what it will happen for you, and probably has happened for most of you, is that we start developing habits in here. You know, my ritual that I need. Because what happens is a spiritual memory kicks in. And these little things that I do, like pushing the shopping cart and showing up to meetings early and staying afterwards and being of service and making friends like some of the people I know in this room that I call friends. Not acquaintances, not the connection, not the guy who's going to, you know, slit my throat the minute he has the opportunity. Real friendships. We're like survivors of a shipwreck, you know. You judge someone in AA, it's like switching seats on the Titanic. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. Of course we do it. That's the nature of who we are. It's the nature of this beast up here that wants me to go, doesn't want me to be here tonight, you know. But the God inside of me connects with the God inside of you, and we can talk. We can connect that way, my soul to your soul, because there's no other way to connect. There's just no other way. You know, I identified with alcoholics. I came to meetings. I'd pretty much decided that I didn't like what was out there. I was more afraid of that than I was of you. And I was afraid of you. Now, like our first speaker, I sat in the back and my arms were folded and I wanted to keep you out and I wanted to keep everyone out because I was petrified, you know. And this character defect called anger protected me. It's fear in another form. Fear takes many, many forms. And my sponsor, when I did my inventory, I remember her saying, you know what, don't be mad at that girl who's angry. Don't be mad at that part of Bridget who was angry. She protected you the best she could her whole life. Be nice to her. And I had tears in my eyes when I heard that because no one was nice to her. No one understood that I had a disease. I didn't understand I had a disease. I hated myself. And for all the times that I said to myself in my mind, all these conversations with self, as rotten as my mother was to me, she was not nearly as cruel to me as I was. You know, I was a good student out there. I was a good slave to King Alcohol. I mean, you don't go fishing on methadone, let's put it that way. You show up 5:45. I was never late. Never late. You know, if I needed alcohol and that bar wasn't open, I was there before they opened. I was good. I was a soldier. And if I turned 1/10 of that energy into my sobriety, I was promised that I could make it here. And can you imagine if it was more like 50%, the feeling I would get? So I started getting these better feelings by doing different actions, you know, just by doing things that I didn't think made sense at all. Getting a sponsor if you're in your first year. You know, you're under a really graceful umbrella in Alcoholics Anonymous in your first year. If you go to meetings and you have a sponsor and you do what they say, and they're doing what they say, that's important too. You know, monkey see, monkey do, but pick the right monkey for God's sakes. You're fine. Nothing bad can happen to you. I don't care if you get a parking ticket or your boyfriend or your girlfriend leaves you. There's no reason to drink. There really isn't. You know, Maureen and I were talking the other night in my early sobriety. I got into a relationship quick. I wouldn't advise it, but I'm just being honest. And it crushed me. It devastated me. The guy that I was seeing, I was 5 months sober. He was a couple of years. That was a big deal to me. And he was sleeping with my sister. I didn't know. How could I not know? But I didn't know. Maybe I didn't want to know, but everybody else knew. The whole group knew. My sponsor knew. She was very good friends with him. The humiliation when I found out, I was visiting my brother who was in Wayside. And it was Mother's Day, 1983. I'll never forget, May 10th. I had 5 months sober, almost 5 months. In one more week, I would have had 5 months. And I go up to see Louie, and he said, so, is your so-and-so still seeing so-and-so? So-and-so being the boyfriend, and the other so-and-so being my sister. And my mouth hit the floor. That was his way of telling me he wanted his sister to know. And I said, thank you, Louie. And I took the bus from Newhall to Pasadena to a meeting because, see, I just got one of my last trips after jail was Impact House, and I'd been thrown out, and that's another story in and of itself. But you know what? I developed habits. So when the crap hit the fan, I had a habit. I had a ritual. I knew where to go Sunday at 2 o'clock, and that was the afternoon meeting, and I was there. I was there like a crazy woman. I'm going to kill her. I'm going to kill her. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill her. I'm going to kill him. Good. Just don't drink. Right on. Sit down. Have a cup of coffee. No, don't have coffee. She doesn't need any coffee. And you know, someone said, God, it's amazing you didn't drink over that. But you know what? I was told when I first got here, and I'm a person who drinks no matter what, that we don't drink no matter what. No matter what. If your butt's falling off, you don't drink. The old-timers would scream it and scream it. If your leg falls off, if your mother dies, if your cat scratches your eyeballs out, you don't drink no matter what. You don't drink no matter what. And if you hear that every day for 5 months, it starts to reverberate just a little bit. Thank God. Thank God for you and your chanting crap. And life goes on. You know, I was very hurt, very disappointed. It propelled me out of Narcotics Anonymous into Alcoholics Anonymous, so things happen for a reason, and I'm not here to degrade any 12-step program, but this is the mothership, let's face it. So I get a new sponsor, I'm going to new meetings, and I remember telling the sponsor, I've got to change everything. I can't go to those meetings with those people because they all know him and he knows her, and it's just too dramatic. And she said, you know what, don't network in the nut house. You have no business being in a relationship. You have no business socializing with any of those people. And I had to get a meeting commitment every single night. 7 and 7. That's a lot to do. But I did it because God knows I had nothing else to do. And it got me planted here. It got me really planted here. And my first inventory was an absolute joke, but I did it anyway. And when my sponsor said, all right, I've been taking notes about character defects, I said, you got to be kidding. I don't have any. I'm too young. I'm 23. How many defects could I have? And then 8 and 9, I said, oh, yeah, I have that list of people that owe me amends. And I started to read it to her. And she said, this is not how it works. And I said, people did me wrong, man. Okay? They did me wrong. And she said, all right, we're going to talk tomorrow. Eat a banana, take a hot bath, and read the big book. I said, what page? She goes, any page. It doesn't matter. Any page will do. And eventually, you know, I started to be able to, you know, this disease of perception and denial is so thick. I think I was about 5 years sober when it really dawned on me. I got the realization that, thank God, I had all these rituals down pat, because the reasons why I drank were starting to come up. And I took a cake for 5 years at Radford. I was so depressed. And I made this decision, depressed, to go visit my mother. Bad idea. But, you know, alcoholic mom, I'll show her my 5-year medallion and get all that approval I always wanted and maybe take her to a meeting. And I go knocking on mom's door. She was living in LA at the time. And she said, come on in. And I knew she was drunk. So I went right to the refrigerator and I got some iced tea and I opened the freezer to get ice. And in the freezer was my cat from childhood, Maria. Maria I'd had since I was 4 years old. She was old, 23. But, you know, being in detox and jail and all that, I was busy, so Mom took care of Maria. I just, you know, I knew she was old. I didn't expect to see her in the freezer. And it was December, so I'm thinking, you know, maybe, you know, it's only a month after Thanksgiving. Maybe Mom forgot to cook the turkey, because that's the kind of mom she is. So I opened the freezer again just to make sure that it is indeed Maria and not a turkey, and it was my cat. Closed the freezer, and she said, close the freezer, Maria's dead. And I'm thinking, well, God, I hope so. I mean, why? I don't know what else she'd be doing in there. And, you know, my sister was there, and my sister was drinking at the time, and my sister said, well, it kind of makes sense, you know? And I said, yeah, in this house it makes perfect sense. And I left, and now I'm real depressed, okay? I thought I was down when I got there. I'm dragging. My shoulders are down. I'm thinking, I just want to die, man. Life is too hard. Thinking about Maria, thinking about my mother, thinking. And so I called my sponsor, thank God, and I told her what happened and that I was depressed when I took my cake. And she said, you know, don't go back to the scene of the crime. You know, it's like the jaywalker in the big book. You know, this book and this 12 and 12 that we read, it's for people who are sober. You're not going to read this drunk. It makes no difference if you're drunk. I'm the jaywalker, stone cold sober. I go back to the scene of the crime repeatedly, okay? And finally, it's like the old saying, he who sits on a hot stove will rise again. Eventually, you're going to knock it off. And what happens after being sober a long time is you get the gift of retrospect, and you get to see, you know, I remember that last ass whipping, and it really was pretty bad. I'm not going back. But until it's really bad, you will go back, and you'll tell yourself it really wasn't that bad, no matter what the situation is. If it's a bad attitude at work, a bad relationship, money problems, over shopping, well, I really do need this. I do. The rent can wait. We get creative sober. And my sponsor said, you know, you're going to have to embrace Alcoholics Anonymous as your family. You've got a spiritual family now. You know, this is a spiritual malady. You've got the fellowship. You know, this triangle is an old, ancient, sacred symbol that we use for our program. And we've got to be of service. We have to show up together. We can't do this alone, regrettably, because I like to do things alone. You know, people were always a problem for me. I liked certain narcotics because I could lock the bathroom door. I knew every bathroom in Hollywood with a lock on it. Every gas station that didn't have a stall, it had the bathroom with the lock, you know, privacy, for God's sakes. Um, that's the way I like to do my thing, you know. A good night for me is flatline, you know. And if people used to tell me, I've got this stuff that's killed 10 people, I'd say, where'd you get it? There's something really wrong with that. And yet at the same time, I was afraid of suicide because I might go to hell. So I was afraid to live, afraid to die. And I was such a hopeless, you know, this is such a hopeless disease. And Alcoholics Anonymous is so full of hope. I was so hopeless, I couldn't kill myself. Because there was a part of me that said, you know what, you're going to come back and do this again. You're going to just be one miserable soul dragging your ass through this crap one more time. So I surrendered. I got so exhausted and my life was so awful. Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a good time. Number one, I got very busy and very committed. Get busy, get committed. I had fun. We went to conventions. We went water skiing. I went to dances. I began to have a life. I had things to talk about other than drinking. What a shock. What a shock. You know, I learned how to pay bills, how to get an apartment. I was told to be self-supporting through my own contributions immediately, that I couldn't go to anybody for money. None of that old hanky-panky. None of that stuff. I had to get a job. You know, I had a lot of jobs, and finally I landed a job that I kept for a while. And, you know, at about 7 years sober, some stuff started coming up in my life, and I started thinking, and which is a bad idea. But Alcoholics Anonymous, I wasn't getting mine. I wasn't getting something from this program. You know, I had a list of things I wanted, and they were all tangible. None were spiritual. None were feelings. I was convinced, just like the book talks about, that talk about full flight from reality, stone cold sober, that if I had these things, this car, this apartment, this guy, this job, this career, I would be okay. That's what this was about. And I got all of those things, and I was miserable, absolutely miserable. And I thought the solution would be to sue my boss. So I proceeded to try to do that, and I ended up talking to a woman on the phone who I'd never met. Her name was Gail, and Gail has passed on, but Gail saved my life. And I told her, well, I heard that you might know an attorney. I need to sue my boss. I told her the story. She asked me a little bit about myself, and asked me how long I was sober, and I told her 7 years, and she said, you know, you sound like a newcomer. And I felt like I got kicked in the stomach. But in the next breath, I was so relieved because I got to be reminded, oh my God, the problem is Bridget. I forgot. I forget a lot. I need you to remind me. Problem is in here. Problem is in here. I've got a perception disorder, you know, and the things are going to fix me. I forgot that the H&I panels that I was doing, that the direction I was taking was all filling me up and gave me these feelings that I tried so hard to get from alcohol, and that alcohol used to give me at one time but stopped so long ago. She had me meet her at a meeting the following night, and she said, you know, I'd rather hurt your feelings than watch you die. I got to tell you the truth. You have got to get back into this book and do another inventory at another level. You know, it's not like being 6 months or a year sober again. You know, this disease knows as much about staying sober as you do. You can't ever stop practicing these principles, and if you get out of practice, you get out of sync. And if I'm out of sync and I'm out of balance, I'm down your throat, and I'm miserable. So I did another inventory and did a lot of work on my family. My life started to change, you know, and at 13 years of sobriety, God, it's interesting. I spoke here a few years ago, and I didn't know Maureen, but she knew my brother, and my brother had gotten a 90-day chip. He'd really had 1 or 2 chances in AA, spent time in prison quite a bit. Wonderful guy, smart, sweet, gorgeous. He drank and OD'd, and his friends dumped his body in a parking lot. You know, our friends. I use that word rather loosely. And he was in a coma. And the paramedics picked him up. He had no ID. He was in the hospital under a John Doe, and I found him a week later in a coma. And I don't know if you've ever seen anyone in a coma.
They look dead, but yet they're supposed to be alive. And I got to tell you, I wanted to tear my skin off. The pain and the frustration and the anger I had at God was insurmountable. I felt like I was in a bear trap and that I was screaming and that no one could hear me. No one would put this fire out. That's how I felt. I wanted the pain to go away. I wanted to be fixed. I wanted it to stop. I wanted God to either wake him up or let him die. These are things that I want. God, can't you hear me? I need to be out of pain. Now, I'm not thinking, where's my brother in all of this? But what happened is my family converged, the people that I had run from my whole life. And I was also told in AA that pain won't kill you, but resisting it will. And it submerged on me at 13 years, and I didn't think I'd make it. I really felt like if I couldn't drink, at least I should take some pills, medication. And I'd heard people in meetings saying, oh, yeah, I'm taking this stuff and I'm feeling much better. And I'm thinking, I hate you. Because I was raised, you know what, I know for me I'm an alcoholic, and I am no doctor. I am not here to characterize anyone as not needing or needing any kind of medication. I know I don't. I know my medication is right here in these steps, and that pain won't kill me. I just don't like it. My brother came out of the coma so brain damaged for the last 8 years, he's lived in a diaper on a feeding tube. That's his life. And he lays in a bed and all he can do is scream as a direct result of alcoholism. He went out that one night, and never came back. Came back in a form that I never imagined. I used to think to myself, I'm going to prepare myself for my brother dying, because I know he's going to go out and die. You're never prepared, and I certainly wasn't prepared for this. And a couple of years ago, my family has been a real source of trauma, because this is the family disease, and there's been a lot of pain in my family. And, I spoke here a few years ago, and Maureen said, oh my God, I knew your brother. I worked with him. I knew your brother. And we just had this very special connection. My father, the very stoic, angry survivor, I say Al-Anon type, but who am I to judge? He was in an accident a few years ago. He was a race car driver, and he lost his arm. He got in a crash, and his right arm got cut off. And let's just say his life is severely altered because of that. And he got in such a bad depression, he tried to kill himself, tried to commit suicide. And my father and I have had very strained relations. Even in sobriety, I crossed my arms because, he owed me. He owed me. You know what I mean? It wasn't about me cleaning up my side of the street in its entirety. My head would kick in every so often and would say, yeah, but come on. Let's excuse some of these character defects, because God only knows you were raised a certain way. And that's nothing more than my mind trying to take over, and my soul sickness saying, let's go. We need a drink. We deserve a drink, don't we? And my rotten behaviors will lead me right back to the bottle. The negative thinking in AA, stone cold sober, is like the froth on the glass. You keep it up, and you're going to be unmanageable so quick. I hope you get to step 2 in time. I hope you get there, because not all of us do. And I got to show up for my father and be there for him and get him the help he needed. And today, my father and I speak on the phone every single day. I love my dad. I don't just love my dad, I like him. And I always did. Of my parents, my mother sort of really embarrassed me, but my dad is one of those people that, no one could say they didn't like my dad. They couldn't say that about Mom, but they could say that about my father. And he always says, I don't know what they do in AA meetings. I don't know what has happened with you, but God, would you please tell them thank you for giving me my daughter back. I lost my son. I almost lost my life. I lost my arm, but I have my daughter. And I want to thank you not only for giving me a life where I can include my father and my family, but for giving me a life where I can include you and not be alone, because we do this together. Thank you. Yay.